The cold metal chair made a scraping sound as Veltar shifted his weight. His crystalline scales caught the harsh light from above, creating tiny rainbows on the gray walls. The alien's hands were locked in metal restraints, but his dark eyes moved constantly, watching everything in the small room. Commander Hyunwoo sat across from him at a simple metal table. The human looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and wrinkles in his uniform. He had been asking questions for 3 hours now, and Veltar had been giving the same answers. "Tell me again about the battle at New Busan," Hyunwoo said. His voice was calm and patient. He pressed a button on a small device and it began recording their conversation. Behind the one-way glass wall, Captain Yoonji watched and listened. She stood with her arms crossed, her face showing no emotion. Sometimes she made notes on a tablet, but mostly she just observed. Veltar made a sound that might have been a sigh. The translation device on the table turned it into human words. "Your people fight like animals," he said. "No honor, no rules, no mercy. We won." Hyunwoo replied simply, "You destroyed everything we believed about war." Veltar's scales darkened, a sign of distress in his species. "When our fleet arrived at your colony, we expected soldiers to meet us. We expected battle lines and proper combat. Instead, we found something else entirely." The alien's clawed fingers tapped against his restraints. "Your farmers became killers. Your children became spies. Your doctors became torturers. How do you live with yourselves?" Hyunwoo leaned back in his chair. "We live because we do what we must to survive. That's what matters. Survival." Veltar spoke the word like it tasted bad. "Is that all humans care about? What about dignity? What about honor in battle?" "Honor doesn't keep our families alive," Hyunwoo answered. "Honor doesn't protect our homes. Honor is a luxury we can't afford when someone tries to destroy us." Through the glass, Captain Yoonji made another note. She had fought in the battle Veltar was describing. She remembered the fear in the colonists' eyes when they first learned about the alien fleet. She also remembered how that fear had changed into something else entirely. Veltar's head lowered. "We studied your species before we attacked. Your broadcasts, your culture, your history. We thought we understood you. You seemed peaceful. Your colonies were full of farmers and teachers and doctors. We expected easy victory. What did you find instead?" Hyunwoo asked, though he already knew the answer. "We found predators pretending to be prey." Veltar's voice grew quieter. "Your people smiled at us while they planned our deaths. They offered us water that would poison us. They gave us maps that led us into traps. They spoke of surrender while preparing ambushes." The alien raised his head and looked directly at Hyunwoo. "Your soldiers didn't fight to win battles. They fought to break our minds. They studied us like we were insects, learning our fears, our beliefs, our weaknesses. Then they used all of it against us." Hyunwoo said nothing, just waited for Veltar to continue. "Do you know what it's like?" Veltar asked. "To hear the voice of your dead commander giving orders? To watch your own people turn their weapons on each other because they believe false commands? To see your most sacred rituals turned into nightmares?" "It sounds effective," Hyunwoo said. Captain Yoonji watched Veltar flinch at those words. The alien's scales shifted color again, this time to a pale, sickly shade. "Effective," Veltar repeated. "Yes, it was effective. We lost more than ships and soldiers. We lost our minds. We lost our faith. We lost our understanding of what war should be." Hyunwoo leaned forward. "What should war be?" "Noble." Veltar's voice grew louder. "War should be about courage and strength and honor. Soldiers should face each other with weapons and skill. The strong should win and the weak should accept defeat with dignity." "That's not how humans fight," Hyunwoo said. "No, it's not." Veltar's voice became sad. "Humans fight to win at any cost. You don't care about rules or honor or dignity. You care only about destroying your enemy completely." The alien was quiet for a moment, then continued. "We captured some of your people during the early battles. We thought they would beg for mercy or try to bargain for their lives. Instead, they watched us. They learned our routines, our language, our customs. They turned themselves into weapons even while they were prisoners." Captain Unji remembered those prisoners. Some of them had been her friends. They had volunteered to be captured knowing the risks. They had gone into enemy hands with orders to gather information and create chaos from within. "One of your doctors," Veltar continued, "treated our wounded soldiers. She was gentle and kind, and we began to trust her. Then we discovered she had been poisoning our officers slowly, making them sick and confused. She had been learning our anatomy so she could hurt us more effectively. Hyunwoo made a note on his tablet. Dr. Hyejin, she received a medal for her service. A medal for poisoning wounded soldiers, Veltar said. This is what humans call heroism. She saved human lives, Hyunwoo replied. She gathered intelligence that helped us win the war. Yes, we call that heroism. Veltar stared at him for a long moment. Your species frightens me. Not because you're strong or smart or advanced. You frighten me because you have no limits. There's nothing you won't do. Nothing you won't sacrifice, nothing you won't corrupt to achieve victory. Behind the glass, Captain Yoonji checked her watch. They had been at this for hours, and Veltar was finally beginning to understand. Soon they would move to the next phase of the interrogation. Tell me about the final battle, Hyunwoo said. Tell me what happened when your people realized they couldn't win. Veltar's scales grew even paler. That's when we learned the most terrible truth about humans. We thought your cruelty in war was because you were desperate. We thought you would show mercy once victory was certain. And you became worse. The closer you came to winning, the more terrible you became. It was like you enjoyed our suffering. Like breaking us was more important than defeating us. Hyunwoo closed his tablet. We needed to make sure you would never attack human colonies again. Fear is a powerful teacher. Yes, Veltar whispered. We learned to fear you, all of us. Even now safe in this room, I fear what you might do next. The commander stood up and walked to the door. Rest now. Tomorrow we'll talk about what happened to your home fleet. As the door closed behind Hyunwoo, Veltar was left alone with his memories and his fears. Through the glass, Captain Yoonji continued to watch and take notes. The real interrogation was just beginning. 3 months earlier, the morning sky above New Busan was bright and clear. Soon-young stood on the steps of the Colonial Administration Building, watching children walk to school and farmers heading to their fields. The colony looked peaceful like any other human settlement on the outer worlds. But Soon-young knew the truth. Hidden beneath the calm surface, New Busan was ready for war. The warning had come 6 days ago through encrypted channels. Long-range sensors had detected an alien fleet moving toward their system. Military advisor Jin-ho had immediately activated Protocol Darkness, and now every person in the colony had a job to do. Jin-ho walked up the steps to join Soon-young. His face was serious, but he didn't look worried. The Kethmori fleet will arrive in 4 hours, he said quietly. Are we ready? Soon-young nodded. The evacuation is complete. The children and elderly are in the bunkers with full communication equipment. All civilian areas have been prepared. To anyone watching, it would look like New Busan was trying to hide from the coming attack. The truth was very different. The colony had transformed itself into a trap. In the school building, teacher Bo-ram was helping her students with their new assignment. Instead of reading books, the children were learning to operate radio equipment. The youngest ones, barely 8 years old, were memorizing false information to broadcast to the aliens. Older students were practicing voice modulation to sound like adult human officers. Remember, Bo-ram told them, when the aliens try to locate our military headquarters, you tell them it's in the North Sector.
Keep repeating the false coordinates.
Make them believe our main forces are there. The children nodded seriously. They understood that their game of pretend could save lives. Across town, farmers Dongmin and Mi-young were in their equipment shed, working with tools that had once harvested crops. Now those same tools were being converted into weapons. Farming machines became bombs. Irrigation pipes became launchers for explosive projectiles. How many can we make? Mi-young asked, welding a pressure plate to what used to be a seed planter. Enough, Dongmin replied. He was programming their automated farming systems with new instructions. Instead of watering plants, the systems would spray acid at specific coordinates. Instead of spreading fertilizer, they would scatter sharp metal fragments designed to puncture alien armor. The colony's medical center looked normal from the outside, but inside the staff was preparing for a very different kind of medicine. Dr. Hyejin sorted through medical supplies, separating them into 2 groups, those that would help wounded humans, and those that would harm alien physiology. The Kethmori have copper-based blood, she told her nurses. These chemicals will poison them slowly. Mix them into any food or water we offer as humanitarian aid. One of the younger nurses looked uncomfortable. Doctor, isn't that against medical ethics? Hyejin paused in her work. Our ethics are to protect human life. If poisoning the enemy saves our people, then it's the right thing to do. In the colony's power plant, engineer Tejo was making final adjustments to the electrical grid. Normally, the power system provided safe, reliable energy to every building, but Tejo had installed hidden switches that could turn any metal surface in the colony into a deadly electrical trap. Test the school playground. Equipment, he told his assistant over the radio. A few seconds later, the reply came back. Confirmed. Monkey bars now carry lethal voltage. We can activate individual sections as needed. Good. What about the residential areas? Every doorknob, every metal railing, every vehicle can be electrified on command. The aliens won't know which surfaces are safe to touch. Meanwhile, in the underground bunkers, the colony's children and elderly citizens were far from inactive. Grandmother Kyungja, 73 years old, sat at a communications console with 5 other senior citizens. They were monitoring alien communications and preparing to flood the frequencies with false information. When they asked for surrender negotiations, Kyungja instructed the others. I'll pretend to be the colony leader. I'll sound scared and desperate. I'll offer to meet them at the community center, and then, asked her neighbor 80-year-old Myung-ho. Then we detonate the entire building when they arrive for the meeting, Kyungja said calmly. But first we make sure to get as many of their officers inside as possible. The elderly group practiced their deception, learning to sound like frightened civilians begging for mercy. In reality, they were coordinating one of the most complex military operations in colonial history. As the alien fleet appeared in the sky, Soon-young stood in the colony square and activated her personal communicator. All across New Busan, hidden speakers crackled to life. Citizens of New Busan, she said, her voice carrying to every person in the colony. Today we show these aliens what happens when they threaten human families. Today we teach them to fear us. The Kethmori ships landed in the fields outside town, exactly where the colonists had expected. Hundreds of alien soldiers marched toward New Busan, their weapons ready, their formations perfect. They expected to find terrified farmers and helpless civilians. Instead, they were walking into the most carefully prepared killing ground in human military history. Young Soo-jin, only 12 years old, watched the aliens through her bunker's periscope. She activated her radio and spoke in the scared voice Boram had taught her. Please help us, she said in perfect Kethmori language. We're trapped in the school. There are injured children here. We need medical assistance. The alien commander heard the transmission and immediately sent a rescue team toward the school. They thought they were responding to a humanitarian crisis. They were actually walking into a building packed with explosives, controlled by a 12-year-old girl who would detonate them at the perfect moment to cause maximum casualties. Farmer Dong Min waited in his field, his hands dirty from working in the soil. When the alien patrol approached, he dropped his tools and raised his hands in surrender. He looked exactly like a frightened farmer who wanted to cooperate. Please don't hurt my family, he begged in broken Kethmori. I'll tell you where the soldiers are hiding. The aliens relaxed slightly. This was what they had expected. Quick submission from inferior beings. Dong Min led them toward his barn, explaining in halting alien speech that human military supplies were hidden inside. The aliens followed eagerly, thinking they had found valuable intelligence. The barn exploded when they were all inside. The blast was so powerful that debris landed in the next field over. All across New Busan, similar scenes played out. Every human the aliens encountered seemed to be a helpless civilian. Every building they entered seemed to be a safe refuge. Every offer of cooperation seemed genuine, and every single one was a trap. Dr. Hee-jin waited in the medical center with clean bandages and healing supplies clearly visible. When wounded alien soldiers were brought to her, she treated them with gentle care and professional skill. She spoke softly to them in their own language, offering comfort and hope. The medicine she gave them would take 3 days to kill them. By then, she would have treated dozens of other alien soldiers, sending them back to their units carrying death in their bloodstream. Engineer Tejo sat in his control room, watching monitors that showed every street in the colony. When alien patrols touched metal surfaces, he could electrocute them instantly. When they took shelter in buildings, he could turn the entire structure into a deadly cage. But he waited. He let many aliens pass safely, building their confidence. He wanted them to feel secure, to believe they understood the dangers. Then, when they least expected it, he would turn their safe spaces into killing grounds. The battle for New Busan had begun, But the aliens didn't know they were fighting yet. They thought they were dealing with a simple occupation of defeated civilians. They would learn the truth soon enough. Ground Commander Zethkal stood in the center of New Busan's main square, his scaled hands clasped behind his back. Around him, his soldiers reported their progress in securing the human colony. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. "Sir," called Lieutenant Veltar, approaching with his squad, "we've established patrol routes through the residential areas. The humans appear to be cooperating." Zethkal nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Any signs of military resistance?" "None, sir. We've encountered only civilians. Farmers, teachers, medical workers. They seem frightened but willing to help us locate any hidden weapons or soldiers." "Good," Zethkal said. "This is how conquest should proceed. Swift, efficient, with minimal resistance from inferior species." But even as he spoke, the commander felt a strange unease. Something about this colony didn't feel right. The humans were too cooperative, too helpful. In his experience, conquered peoples usually showed more fear or anger. 3 hours later, Veltar's unease was growing stronger. His squad had been led to 5 different locations by helpful human civilians. Each time promised they would find hidden military supplies. Each location had been empty. "Perhaps the humans moved their weapons before we arrived," suggested Corporal Nekthi. Veltar wasn't convinced. Maybe. But why do they keep volunteering information? Most conquered species try to hide anything useful from their captors. Their conversation was interrupted by an explosion from the north sector. Smoke rose above the buildings and screams echoed through the streets. "Squad 7, report." Zethkal's voice crackled over their communicators. The response was filled with static and panic. "Commander, There was a medical station. The human doctor was helping our wounded. Then everything exploded. More explosions followed throughout the afternoon. Each time the pattern was the same. Humans offering help or information, aliens accepting gratefully, then sudden death and destruction. By evening, Zethkal had lost 43 soldiers to what appeared to be random accidents and equipment failures. But the commander was beginning to suspect these incidents weren't random at all. "Veltar," he called his lieutenant over, "tell me about your interactions with the humans today." "They've been very cooperative, sir." "Almost eager to please." "A farmer showed us where he claimed weapons were hidden. A teacher offered to help us understand human tactical thinking. A doctor treated our wounded soldiers." "And what happened to the soldiers the doctor treated?" Veltar checked his reports. They've been reporting sick, sir. Stomach problems, mostly. The medical officer thinks it might be something they ate." Zethkal's eyes narrowed. "Or something they were given as medicine." The truth was even worse than the commander suspected. In the colony's underground bunkers, the human civilians were coordinating their campaign of terror with military precision. 12-year-old Su Jin monitored alien communications from her hiding place beneath the school. She had already detonated 3 separate buildings, timing each explosion perfectly to cause maximum casualties. "Grandma Kyung-ja," she whispered into her radio. "The aliens are getting suspicious. They're starting to avoid our helpful civilians." The old woman's voice came back calm and steady. "Then it's time for Phase 2, dear. Make them afraid of everything, not just our help." Sujin smiled and switched to a different frequency. This channel connected her to every hidden speaker system in the colony. With a few adjustments, she could make sounds appear to come from anywhere in New Busan. That night, as the alien soldiers tried to sleep in their temporary base, they heard things that chilled their blood. Kethmori voices calling for help from empty buildings, the sound of their own commanders giving impossible orders, recordings of their dead comrades speaking from beyond the grave. Veltar lay awake listening to what sounded like his deceased brother calling his name from the darkness outside. He knew his brother had died 2 years ago on their homeworld, but the voice was perfect, exact in every detail. "Veltar," the voice whispered through the walls, "the humans killed me. They're coming for you next. Don't trust anyone. Don't trust anything." Other soldiers reported similar experiences. Dead friends and family members seemed to be speaking to them, warning them about human treachery, describing horrible deaths that awaited them. By morning, the entire alien force was exhausted and paranoid, but the psychological warfare was just beginning. Engineer Taeho activated his electrical grid as the sun rose. Alien soldiers who had safely touched metal surfaces the day before suddenly found themselves electrocuted. Railings that had been harmless became deadly. Vehicle doors that had opened smoothly now delivered lethal shocks. The aliens quickly learned not to touch anything made of metal, but that created new problems because almost everything in the colony contained metal components. Farmer Dongmin, meanwhile, had activated his modified irrigation system. Instead of water, the pipes now sprayed a mixture of acid and human-manufactured toxins designed specifically to harm Kethmori physiology. The aliens couldn't drink from any tap, couldn't wash in any fountain, couldn't even trust the rain that fell from the sky, because the humans had learned to contaminate everything. Dr. Hyejin had moved beyond poisoning the wounded. Now she and her medical team were spreading disease through the air circulation systems in buildings the aliens used for shelter. The diseases were engineered to affect only Kethmori biology, leaving humans completely safe. But perhaps the most disturbing development was how the human children had begun to behave. Little Hyojin, age 7, approached an alien patrol with tears in her eyes. She spoke in perfect Kethmori, begging the soldiers to help her find her missing mother. "Please," she sobbed. "I heard her calling for help. She's trapped somewhere, but I can't find her." The aliens, despite their growing suspicions, couldn't ignore a crying child. Their own species valued young lives above all else, and their instincts demanded they offer assistance. Hyojin led them through winding streets, following the sound of a woman's voice calling for help. The voice seemed to move, always staying just out of sight, always leading them deeper into the colony. The aliens didn't realize they were following a recording broadcast through hidden speakers, controlled by the same child who was guiding them. They didn't understand that the crying little girl was leading them into an ambush site where older children waited with weapons designed to kill. By the third day of occupation, Commander Zethkal had lost over 200 soldiers to attacks that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. His troops were afraid to eat anything, drink anything, touch anything, or trust anyone. "Sir," Veltar reported, his voice shaking with exhaustion and fear, "the men are saying the humans aren't really alive. They think we're fighting ghosts or demons." "Don't be ridiculous," Zethkal snapped, but privately he was beginning to wonder if his lieutenant might be right. Everything about this colony defied military logic. How could farmers and teachers coordinate such sophisticated attacks? How could children operate complex equipment? How could elderly civilians manage military-grade communications networks? The answer was simple, but Zethkal couldn't accept it. Every human in New Busan had been trained for this moment. Every civilian was also a soldier. Every child was also a weapon. Every act of kindness was also a trap. That night, Veltar was on guard duty when he heard footsteps approaching through the darkness. He raised his weapon, expecting to see another human civilian with some new deception. Instead, he saw Zethkal walking toward him, but something was wrong with the commander's movement. He walked too stiffly, and his eyes were empty of intelligence. "Commander?" Veltar called softly. Zethkal turned toward him, and Veltar saw the truth. His commander had been dead for hours, but something was animating his body, making him walk and move like a living being. Behind the commander's corpse, 12-year-old Sujin stood in the shadows, holding a device that controlled the mechanical servos she had secretly implanted in Zethkal's armor during what he thought was a routine equipment inspection. "Hello, Veltar," she said in her child's voice. "Your commander has a new mission for you." Marine Wujin crouched in the forest outside New Busan, adjusting the volume on his portable speaker system. Around him, his squad of specialists prepared their equipment for what humans called mind games. "Remember," Wujin whispered to his team, "we're not trying to kill their bodies. We're trying to kill their spirits." The Kethmori had taken heavy casualties in the colony, but they still had superior numbers and firepower. A direct military confrontation would be costly for the humans. Instead, they would attack something more vulnerable: the aliens' sanity. Sergeant Yujin checked her tablet, which displayed detailed psychological profiles of every Kethmori soldier in the invasion force. Human intelligence had studied the aliens for months, learning their deepest fears and cultural taboos. "The Kethmori are deeply religious," she told her squad. "They believe the spirits of their ancestors guide them in battle. They also have strict mating rituals tied to seasonal cycles." Wujin grinned. "Perfect. Let's give them some spiritual guidance they won't forget." That night, as the alien soldiers tried to rest, the forest around their camp came alive with sound. Hidden speakers throughout the trees began broadcasting recordings that drove the Keth Mori to distraction. First came the mating calls, the sounds that Keth Mori made during their most private and sacred reproduction rituals echoed through the darkness. But the humans had modified the recordings, playing them at the wrong time of year in combinations that were biologically impossible. The effect on the aliens was devastating. Their entire social structure was based on carefully controlled mating behaviors. Hearing those sacred sounds twisted into obscene parodies made many of them physically ill. Lieutenant Veltar covered his ears, but the sounds seemed to penetrate his skull. The mating calls of his people had been turned into weapons against him. "Make it stop," he begged his remaining soldiers, but they were suffering just as much. When the false mating calls finally ended, they were replaced by something worse, the voices of Keth Mori ancestors speaking words of condemnation. Human linguists had studied ancient Keth Mori religious texts and learned to mimic the speech patterns of their holy figures. Now those sacred voices condemned the invasion as unholy, declaring that all soldiers involved were cursed and would be denied entry into the afterlife. For a deeply spiritual species like the Keth Mori, this psychological attack was more painful than any physical weapon. But the humans weren't finished. During the day, Intelligence Officer Yu Jin led a team of specialists in creating what she called corruption shrines. They built grotesque altars throughout the colony using Keth Mori religious symbols, but arranged them in ways that perverted their sacred meaning. Human civilians who had died in the early fighting were positioned around these shrines in poses that suggested ritual sacrifice. The scene was designed to make the aliens believe that humans were practicing cannibalistic death worship using Keth Mori spiritual imagery. When alien patrols discovered these shrines, many of them vomited or collapsed from the psychological shock. Their own religious symbols had been turned into nightmare fuel. "They're soul eaters," whispered Corporal Nekthi after finding the third shrine. "The humans consume the spirits of their enemies." The rumor spread through the alien ranks like a plague, destroying morale and making soldiers afraid to kill any humans, for fear their souls would be devoured. Yu Jin monitored alien communications and smiled when she heard their growing panic. "Phase 3, she told her team. The most devastating psychological attack came when the humans began their conversion ceremonies. Using captured Keth Mori equipment and religious artifacts, groups of human civilians gathered in public spaces to perform what appeared to be alien worship rituals. But every aspect of these ceremonies was deliberately wrong, turning sacred practices into blasphemous mockeries. Children as young as 8 participated in these fake conversions, chanting Keth Mori prayers while performing actions that violated every taboo in alien culture. They mixed religious words with obscene gestures, combined sacred symbols with imagery of death and decay. The aliens watched in horror as entire human families seemed to convert to twisted versions of Keth Mori beliefs. It was more terrifying than any threat of violence, because it suggested that humans could corrupt and destroy everything the aliens held sacred. Veltar witnessed one of these ceremonies and felt his sanity crack. Watching human children mock his people's most sacred rituals while their parents smiled and encouraged them was worse than watching them die. "They're not just trying to kill us," he reported to his remaining commanders. "They're trying to destroy everything we are, everything we believe in." Meanwhile, communications specialist Jae Sung had achieved something that terrified the aliens more than any weapon. He had learned to perfectly mimic Keth Mori voices and speech patterns. Using captured communication equipment, Jae Sung began broadcasting false orders to alien units. His voice was indistinguishable from their real commanders, and his knowledge of military protocols was perfect. "All units in Sector 7, he broadcast, retreat to coordinates 445221 for emergency extraction. The coordinates led to a minefield. Squad leaders report to command post for new orders," he transmitted on another frequency. The command post was actually an abandoned building rigged with explosives. But the most psychologically damaging communications came when Jae Sung began broadcasting on personal family channels, the private frequencies that Keth Mori soldiers used to talk to their loved ones on distant worlds. Families waiting on the Keth Mori homeworld suddenly began receiving messages from their sons, brothers, and fathers serving in the invasion force. But these weren't normal military updates. "Mother," Jae Sung spoke in perfect Keth Mori, using the voice patterns of a dead soldier named Zekmar. The humans have taken my soul. I'm speaking to you from beyond death to warn you. They're coming for our homeworld next. They'll devour all of us. These fake communications from dead soldiers spread panic throughout Kethmori space. Families demanded their government recall the invasion force. Religious leaders declared the war cursed. Political stability began to collapse. On the battlefield, the remaining alien soldiers received frantic messages from home, begging them to retreat before the soul-eating humans could claim more victims. Psychological operations. Chief Sun-hee coordinated the final phase of the mental warfare campaign. Her teams staged elaborate fake executions where humans appeared to kill their own people, to demonstrate their ruthlessness to alien observers. The executions looked completely real, with blood screams and apparent death. Hidden alien surveillance equipment recorded everything, transmitting the footage back to Kethmori Command. What the aliens didn't know was that the executions used advanced makeup and special effects. The victims were volunteers who played their roles perfectly, then escaped through hidden tunnels once the aliens stopped watching. But to Kethmori observers, it appeared that humans were so dedicated to winning the war that they would kill their own people rather than show any weakness. They execute their own children for failing to fight hard enough. One alien scout reported in a message intercepted by human intelligence. These creatures have no natural bonds, no mercy, no limits. The psychological warfare reached its peak when Yujin's team began broadcasting on all Kethmori frequencies simultaneously. Every radio, every communication device, every piece of electronic equipment in the alien force suddenly carried the same message. We are coming for all of you. We will find your homeworlds. We will corrupt your children. We will turn your most sacred beliefs into weapons against you. You cannot hide from us. You cannot reason with us. You cannot defeat us. We are humanity, and we are hungry for your souls. The message repeated in perfect Kethmori, in the voices of their own dead soldiers, accompanied by the twisted sounds of their corrupted religious ceremonies. By that point, most of the remaining alien soldiers were no longer functional as a fighting force. They huddled together, afraid to eat, afraid to sleep, afraid to communicate with each other because they couldn't trust that any voice they heard was real. Lieutenant Veltar sat in the ruins of his command post, surrounded by soldiers who were either dead, missing, or driven insane by fear. He realized that the humans had achieved something unprecedented in galactic warfare. They had destroyed an entire invasion force without winning a single traditional battle. They had turned the aliens' own minds, beliefs, and emotions into weapons against them, and they had done it all while smiling. Communications specialist Jae-sung sat in the hidden bunker beneath New Busan's library, surrounded by alien equipment and translation devices. For days, he had been listening to every Kethmori transmission, learning not just their language but their culture, their fears, and their military protocols. Now he was ready to spring humanity's final trap. Sun-hee, he called to the psychological operations chief. I can perfectly mimic any voice in their command structure. I know their military codes, their family traditions, even their personal habits. Sun-hee studied the communication equipment that filled the bunker. Captured alien devices sat alongside human technology, creating a hybrid system that could reach every Kethmori unit in the invasion force. Can you convince them that their own commanders are giving orders? She asked. Better than that, Jae-sung replied with a cold smile. I can convince them that they're dead. Commanders are still alive and giving orders. The final assault began at dawn on the 7th day of the occupation. Lieutenant Veltar was trying to maintain order among his remaining soldiers when his communication device crackled to life. The voice that emerged was unmistakably that of Commander Zethkal. All units, this is Commander Zethkal, the voice said clearly. I'm trapped in Sector 4 with critical intelligence. Send immediate backup to coordinates 847332. Veltar felt relief flood through him. His commander was alive, but something nagged at his memory. Hadn't he seen Zethkal's body yesterday? Sir, he responded, confirm your status. We believed you were. We thought you had been killed. Negative, came the reply in Zethkal's familiar voice. I was captured but managed to escape. The humans have a weakness we can exploit, but I need all remaining forces to converge on my position immediately. Against his better judgment, Veltar began gathering his soldiers. The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every speech pattern exactly matched his dead commander. What Veltar didn't know was that Jae-sung had recorded hundreds of hours of Zethkal's communications. Using advanced human technology, he could construct any sentence in the commander's voice, making it sound completely natural. Across the battlefield, similar conversations were taking place. Dead officers were giving orders to their former subordinates. Destroyed units were calling for reinforcement. Soldiers who had been vaporized in explosions were requesting medical assistance. The Kethmori military structure began to collapse as living soldiers tried to follow orders from commanders they had watched die. But Jae-sung wasn't finished using the alien's own communication network. He began broadcasting conflicting orders to different units. One group was told to attack the human colony from the north. Another was ordered to assault from the south. A third unit received commands to establish defensive positions in the same location. When the confused alien forces encountered each other, they assumed they were facing human soldiers in stolen Kethmori armor. Firefights broke out between allied units as they followed contradictory orders from voices they trusted. Sector 7. You are firing on friendly forces, Jae-sung broadcast, using the voice of a respected alien general. Cease fire immediately and redirect your attack toward Sector 9. Sector 9, enemy forces disguised as our own troops are approaching your position. Engage all targets immediately. The aliens began slaughtering each other while human forces watched from hidden positions. Meanwhile, Sun Hee's team was implementing the most psychologically devastating aspect of their plan. They had discovered that Kethmori soldiers maintained personal communication, links with their families on distant worlds, channels used for private messages between loved ones. Now, those intimate family frequencies carried messages of terror. My beloved Yathara. Jae-sung spoke into the communication system, his voice perfectly mimicking a soldier named Velkoth who had died 3 days earlier. I speak to you from beyond death to deliver a warning. On a world hundreds of light years away, Velkoth's mate received what she believed was a message from her dead husband's spirit. The humans are not like other species, the false voice continued. They don't just kill bodies, they devour souls. I can feel myself disappearing, consumed by their hunger. They're coming for our homeworld next. They'll eat our children's spirits and turn our families into the same monsters they've become. Similar messages reached thousands of Kethmori families across their empire. Parents, spouses, and children received terrifying communications from dead relatives, all describing the same horror, humans who consumed souls and could not be reasoned with or defeated. The psychological impact spread far beyond the battlefield. Entire Kethmori worlds began demanding their government recall all military forces from human space. Religious leaders declared the invasion cursed. Some colonies started evacuating, convinced that humanity was an unstoppable plague that would consume their entire civilization. Back on New Busan, Field Operations Commander Chang Min was preparing for the final deception. He had gathered a group of human volunteers for what would appear to be the most brutal display of human ruthlessness yet witnessed. The fake execution. Site was positioned where alien surveillance equipment could record everything clearly. Human prisoners were lined up, apparently condemned to death for failing to fight with sufficient brutality against the aliens. Remember, Chang Min told his volunteers quietly, you need to look genuinely terrified. The aliens have to believe we really execute our own people for showing any weakness. The volunteers nodded. They were all civilians, farmers, teachers, parents, who had agreed to risk their lives for this crucial deception. As alien monitoring equipment recorded the scene, Chang Min began the mock execution. The special effects were flawless. Blood packets, makeup that simulated fatal wounds, even devices that stopped heartbeats temporarily. To the watching aliens, it appeared that humans were so committed to their war effort that they would kill their own children for not fighting hard enough. One by one, the human prisoners were apparently executed while alien cameras recorded every moment. The footage was automatically transmitted to Kethmori Command, where it created panic among the leadership. They execute their own young for showing mercy, one alien commander reported. These creatures have no natural bonds. They're willing to sacrifice anything to achieve victory. But the most devastating blow came when Jae-sung gained access to the Kethmori fleet's main communication array. Using hijacked alien equipment, he broadcast a message that reached every ship, every soldier, and every officer in the invasion force simultaneously. The message appeared to come from the Kethmori High Command on their homeworld. All forces in human space. This is Supreme Commander Yethmak. We have discovered that humans possess weapons that can destroy souls permanently. Any soldier killed by human forces will cease to exist entirely. No afterlife, no joining with ancestors, complete spiritual annihilation. For the deeply religious Kethmori, this was the ultimate horror. Death in battle was acceptable if it meant joining their honored dead in the afterlife, but the possibility of complete spiritual destruction was worse than any physical torture. All units are ordered to retreat immediately to minimum safe distance. Do not engage human forces under any circumstances. We are abandoning this invasion to prevent further soul loss among our people. The message was completely false, but it sounded authentic because Jae-sung had perfectly reproduced the speech patterns and authorization codes of the real Supreme Commander. Across the battlefield, surviving Kethmori soldiers began retreating toward their evacuation points. But even this retreat was manipulated by human intelligence. Jae-sung sent contradictory retreat orders to different units, routing them through areas where human forces waited in ambush. He directed alien evacuation ships to landing zones that had been converted into trap sites. As the Kethmori tried to flee, they found themselves funneled into kill zones, herded like animals by voices they trusted completely. The final horror came when the aliens realized the truth about human psychological warfare. In their desperation to escape, some Kethmori soldiers began broadcasting warnings to their fleet about human deception tactics. But when they tried to warn their own people about false communications, they discovered that no one could tell the difference between real orders and human mimicry. The humans had become so perfect at imitating Kethmori voices and protocols that authentic alien communications were dismissed as enemy tricks. Lieutenant Veltar found himself trapped in this nightmare of uncertainty. When he tried to radio for evacuation, his own ships refused to respond, believing his voice was a human deception. When real commanders tried to contact him, he assumed they were enemy broadcasts and ignored them. The Kethmori military had become paralyzed by their inability to trust their own communication systems. In the bunker beneath the library, Jae-sung monitored the chaos he had created. Alien forces were destroying each other, fleeing in panic or simply huddling in terror, afraid to move or communicate. "It's over," he told Sun-hee. "They're no longer a functioning military force. They can't trust their own voices, their own orders, or their own people." Sun-hee nodded grimly. "How many actual combat casualties did we inflict?" Jae-sung checked his records. "Maybe 200 aliens killed by direct military action. The rest destroyed themselves or fled."